Hello, my name is Michael Price, currently full of hay fever, so apologies for that. I've taken a lot of interview feedback, so I'm here to talk to you about, and I've distilled my thoughts about second interviews so you can make the most of your time. I've been in sales recruitment for 24 years. I don't know how many second interviews I've arranged, but it's at least 2,000. Hopefully this will help you get the most of your time. It'll help you with your second interview to do well. But actually, I think the second interview is a point at which the candidates can really get into qualifying whether a job's right for them. They can only do that if they have a good second interview. We're going to talk about running the sale, about setting up the interview, about notes, and that one I think is really, really important. We're going to talk about 30, 60, 90-day plans. Personally, I don't like them, but the clients do still seem to like them. We're going to talk about evidence, and then lastly about how you can close the interview itself. So first things first, let's talk about running the sale. So I don't know how the other recruiters do it. My thought has always been that I will do all of the work in terms of arranging the second interview, finding out what the prep notes are, sending the preparation to the candidate, and then I'll help you along the way. What I have found is what a lot of the better candidates will do is they'll take the sale away from me because it's their sale. So they don't cut me out of the loop completely, but actually they cut me out of the loop a lot because they will then consider who are they meeting. And rather than asking me who they're meeting, whether I know them, because I might do, and I will help you if I do, they'll think, right, I'm meeting somebody from talent. What's their agenda? What do they want? I'm meeting a chief exec. What's their agenda? What do they want? And I'm meeting the hiring manager. And when we turn our attention to the hiring manager, if they have put you forward for second interview, it's because they want you to do well. Also, selfishly, they don't want you to do badly. Because if they put somebody through to second interview who then has a terrible second interview, that reflects badly on them and slightly damages their reputation with their manager. So will they coach you? Yeah, don't see why they wouldn't. And if it was me and I had a second interview, I'd certainly be making contact with the hiring manager. I'd then be sending the agenda to the hiring manager and other people involved in the interview process. And I'd be saying, right, this is what I'm going to cover. Are you comfortable with that? Is there anything in particular you want to cover? If it's a presentation, how long do you want the presentation to be? If it's on site, just those things, I'd really be starting to run the sale and take control of it as a salesperson. And then in terms of setting up the interview, I think this is again very important. So sometimes from first interview to second interview, the first interview will tell the second interviewer loads about the candidate. Sometimes from first to second, the first interviewer won't tell the candidate anything. But you and I, we just don't know that. So I would, be trying to find out before the second interview, and I'd find out from the person that did first. If I couldn't find out, one of the first things I would do in that interview is say, right, I met Sam at first interview. I don't know how much they've told you about my background. In terms of today, how much do you need to know about me from an introductory perspective as a match to your role? That would be in the interview. That would be a question that I would ask. Also, when I was setting up the interview, and this would be maybe from the previous slide, but about confirming the agenda, it's what are their expectations out of that interview? You might well have a meeting request that's an hour long, but is it an hour? Have they set aside an hour? Regard the presentation. They've set you a presentation. How long do they want it to be? Because if they've set aside an hour, let's say, do they want an hour of presentation and that's it? Or do they want a 15-minute presentation and then 45 minutes of questions? These are all things that you really need to know, I think, before you attend that second interview. Because if you don't, you may well do well anyway. Let's get it right. You've gone from first interview to second interview, so it must be a decent match. But actually, you really need to understand what their expectations are so that there's no surprises in the second interview. You know, do they want references? I don't know. Unless you ask, you won't know. But if you turn up and you drive to Plymouth for a second interview and you get all the way there and they wanted references and you didn't ask them beforehand whether they wanted references, that's your mistake. Let's talk about notes. So this only happens a handful of times, but when it does happen, it always is a brilliant thing to have happened, where the candidate turns around and said, during the first interview, Sam said they were keen on someone with new business in large sales, so I do have a data sheet. Would that be useful? I can tell you now, hardly anybody says that. And anybody that does is immediately at a massive advantage. The second part is, when I give you feedback, I will tell you exactly what the feedback is. I will tell you the good bits and the bad bits. Often the bad bits are objections, and 9 times out of 10, that's purely because you didn't get a chance to go into it in enough detail. So if you knew what those objections were, should you be making sure you cover them in the second interview? Yes, 100% you should. Also package. Should you talk about package? Yes, at every stage. 100% I would definitely be doing that. Now, quite often package is tricky because let's say the client's paying up to 100k basic and you're on 70, then there's a 30k delta and you've got to figure out how that's going to be covered. But only with an honest conversation in interviews will you be able to do that. Because then what happens if you don't do that is then the second interview goes well and then the client offers you a job and then I'll do my best to sort it out. And I mean, I've done the job for 24 years, so I reckon I'll do a half decent job, but I won't do as good a job as you could have done sat in the interview. Also, in terms of notes, I think that the notes that you take from first interview will always be good further down the line. So if, let's say, in the first interview, you discuss the average order value as being 50k and the target has been 400k, that means you've got to make 8 sales. And then if you get into the sales cycle and the client says, well, it's a 3-month sales cycle, those 2 pieces of information are incredibly important for your 30, 60, 90-day plan. And I could give you miles more examples, but few candidates actually take their first interview notes, not necessarily recite them, but have them ready to use in their second interview. So let's talk about 30, 60, 90-day plans. You might have heard an audible sigh then, but we're in 30, 60, 90, so let's do it. First things first is how much detail do they want? Some clients really want a business plan and quite a detailed one. Some clients want 4 slides. You know, as I said earlier on, that's about getting some coaching to understand that. For me, one of the key questions that I'd be asking with 30, 60, 90-day plan is what does good look like after 90 days? So day 91, what should I have achieved? And I think that question is absolutely critical because a lot of candidates will create this, mega 30, 60, 90-day plan that says they're going to hit target in the first 90 days or, I'm exaggerating, but they might have sold something in the first 90 days. Actually, is that plausible? I'm going to try and sell something in the first 90 days because I want commission. Of course, I'm going to do that. But if it's not plausible based on your notes and their expectation, why say it? The other part is the format of it. I mean, you can see me with PowerPoint. I'm not really the best. I'm pretty simple with it. I've had candidates in the past who sent it off to outsourcers on things like Upwork. $20. Somebody on Upwork will take your presentation and they will make it look absolutely superb. And if you're a busy salesperson and time's of the essence, would you pay $20 to make somebody to ask somebody to make something look better than you could anyway? 100% you would. But again, I'd think about the format. I'd be asking the client. I'd also take the 60-90 with me on however you're going to project it, and you should understand that having set the interview. But I'd also send it to the client. A lot of the time, you're going to turn up to a client's office and try and get your computer on the network. And as much as the manufacturers of projectors say it's dead easy to connect your PC to their projector, it's just not. And if you've actually sent it to somebody there, then at least you can use their computer because it'll be connected to their network. Evidence. This is really important, I think. And I think the best evidence that you can take are your P60s. I think sometimes people are embarrassed about taking the P60s. Excuse me, hay fever's really kicking in. I think sometimes people are embarrassed about taking the P60s because they don't say they've smashed target. Let's get it right. Very few people do hit target all of the time. That just doesn't happen. But even fewer people will take their P60s, will take their comp plan and their P60s, distill it into a table and go, right, that's where I was to target. I also put in references. I don't think all references have to be from people that you worked for. Let's say you sold a killer deal to Argos. And let's say that in some way you needed to reference that. Could you take a deal sheet? Could you take the email from the client when they said they were going to buy it? Because the reality is that most clients are nervous that the candidates are lying. I know that sounds terribly cynical, but if you do this job, do my job for 24 years, every candidate's brilliant and they all closed every deal. But actually, if you worked for company X and Argos was, a really big deal for that company, you can bet your life 2 or 3 other salespeople are going to say that they sold that deal. But if you're the person with the email in your inbox and that appears somewhere in your presentation, that's the kind of evidence I'm talking about. And that's really, for me, I think that's a more powerful reference than some manager who's now your mate who used to work for you. Closing the interviews, it really varies on the environment. Can you close a panel? I've not seen many candidates do it. I have seen candidates go around the room and ask for any objections. They might not word it like that, but I'm sure that's what they do. Can you close 2 or 3 people? Yes, I think you can. I think it takes a bit of bravery. I've had candidates in the past, and we're not talking low-level people, we're talking high-level people who've said, right, I've driven to Bournemouth, I'll go and sit outside for half an hour while you make your decision. You can close it a bit like a panel, closing them individually. I think the only way you're going to get a firm yes or no is if you give them a little bit of breathing space. I think it's much harder to close if you don't know the decision-making process. So if you set the interview up correctly and you know that this is the final stage and you know that you're the only candidate, all information that clients will tell you if you ask them, then that's going to make it a lot easier for you to close it than if you don't. You're always going to get that we've got more to see. That's just an inevitability. The only thing you can say there is to close based on the information that you've discussed and gone through. So based on what we've discussed and my first, second, third interviews, whatever, is there any reason that you wouldn't offer me a job if I was the only candidate in the frame? And that's the key one, if I was the only candidate in the frame, because then you've done what you can do. And again, I talk about package a lot. Package, I think we make it a lot tougher than it needs to be. So I think if I was in an interview and I was talking about package and I was on 70k basic and the client's offering 100, which is quite a very common thing to happen where there's a delta between what the candidate's on and what the client can pay, I'd say clearly I was attracted to this job because you're paying X and I'm on X and I'd like to get as much as possible. There comes a point at which I wouldn't take the job if you offered me a package of X. I'd be really explicit, I'd be really clear, and I would definitely cover it with clarity. Other bits, take good notes. I've said that. What to wear. You should get coaching from the person at first interview, I think. But I'm not saying I'm into fashion because I'm clearly not. Would I go to a second interview dressed like this? Yeah, I would. On-site versus off-site, that does make a difference. If it's off-site, it's in a hotel or something, you have to think about how you're going to present it. And you have to think about the surrounding noise. Also, if it's off-site and it's on Teams, that then makes a difference. Would I be open about the other things I had on the go? Yes, I would. 100%, definitely. If this was my favourite opportunity, I would tell the client it was my favourite opportunity. If this wasn't my favourite opportunity, I would tell the client it wasn't my favourite opportunity. I know a lot of the candidates will lie and say it's their favourite opportunity to get the job and worry about it afterwards. I wouldn't, because if it's not your favourite opportunity, you've got an objection with them in some way, and actually only by being honest will you find out the truth about the objection, and you're sat there with decision makers who can answer those questions. My contact details are on the screen. Hopefully that makes sense. Thank you for putting it with my hay fever. Speak soon.